Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Card Dad, and we have Carlos on. He's been begging me to come back on the channel. Not really.
Relentless.
This is yeah.
Relentless.
He's been reaching out weekly to come back on the channel, and I was like, oh my God, fine. Let's do this. We haven't done this in years, actually. Last time we talked, it was about graded video games. And that market actually collapsed, came back a little bit. It's gone through all sorts of different changes over the last few years, but it's been too long. So wanted to have Carlos back on. How's it going, man?
I can't remember when I've had a more pleasant day.
It's going good. I can't complain right now. We'll talk about it in a bit. Right now, good times, at least from the sporting standpoint, has been good times. And there's some other stuff going well, too.
On that note, I watched your video last night about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm not a baseball guy, so I don't know how long the suffering has been. But
Sure.
I'm going to relate this to my world, where I'm a New Orleans Saints fan, long time, since 1987 when I was 6. And I've told the whole story before. And we're 1-6, starting out the year. And my youngest son, he just we're watching the game on Sunday, and we start, we're down 14-0 basically immediately. He's like, Dad, I wish I had a time machine where I could just go back to 2009 and just experience that in 2009. I was like, damn, that's actually, for a 10-year-old, that was actually and I was thinking God, same, man, same. I told my brother, and he's like, yeah, we're all there. We all just want to have those moments. But the lesson out of that is, and I think you can relate to this, is you suffer for so long that when you do reach these moments, it makes it that much sweeter. It makes it that much more of a thing. So explain kind of what's going on here with your Blue Jays, because it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal.
It is. But I'll share one thing with you that I don't think you're aware of. Part of the reason, so I enjoy, obviously, I talk about on my channel and everything, on my lives and everything, I make reference to the Discord, so Dakota's Discord that we're on. And I get to sit back and enjoy the Peter Griffin versus the chicken between you and Paul. And you know what that is. Now, I'm also a Packers fan. It's right there. But I'm not nearly as insufferable. Yeah. I just kind of sit back and let y'all do your thing.
That's why Paul are the Packers fans. You are the laid back one, and he is the vulture that's always trying to sweep, soar down and take a bite out of me when I'm dying there on Sunday afternoons. And usually I've had a few drinks, and so I've had a couple of beers, and that's when fireworks happen. But anyway,
it makes it a lot more entertaining. Yeah. So the thing is, I'm more calm because for me, it's I'm results oriented. I'm just interested in watching the totality of the game. I actually want the team to win, but at the same time, it's I'm not interested in bragging or arguing with anybody until my team wins. Now, if they win, I will be insufferable. Win. Then fine. I'll join in on the barb throwing. But in the meantime, it's until you've won anything, you get to say nothing. Now, that said, though, obviously it lets me be more even keel. But one of my best friends from university is a New Orleans Saints fan. So I torment him. So no, but that's because we've known each other forever. So every excuse is, and I've delegitimized the 2009 Super Bowl to varying degrees over years. I spent years on this, Dustin. As far as I'm concerned, it never happened. But I'll let you have it.
We're so desperate. We'll take the asterisk. We'll accept it. Yeah. We're so desperate for anything. We'll just take it. That's fine.
Yeah, so I've already got my guy. So when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, if I'm going to torment a New Orleans Saints, I already have one, Dustin. I have one designated, so we're good. We're cool. So yeah. So as far as the Jays are concerned, it's weird because, and maybe I'll pose this question to you as well. It's a long time of just the team being okay. And it's a philosophical question almost. If a team goes a long time without winning something, or they've never won something, I do sympathize with the Mariners fan because they've never been to the World Series at all.
Yeah.
And those two teams started the same year. They're both expansion franchises. I at least have the satisfaction of knowing that all of my favorite teams have won. My favorite hockey team has won the Stanley Cup. I've watched my football team win a couple of Super Bowls. I can't complain about that. I got to watch them. I personally watched them. The Jays won the 2 back-to-back World Series, but I was a kid when that happened. So 32 years from now, so an entire lifetime's gone by. That's why when I did that video, what gave me perspective is I was listening to some 20-something young men discuss this. And for them, the excitement is they have never experienced a World Series game in Toronto, period. It's in the archives. Ye old, go to the YouTube clip and show Joe Carter hitting the home run. But I watched that happen live. And I got to watch that, and I got to watch the 92 team, and I had the Pat Borders poster, the 92 World Series MVP. So I got to see all those things, but it was through a kid's eyes, through a child's eyes.
Yeah.
And then all these years later, entire lifetime later, I've established myself, lived my life, working, but I'm sitting there going like, no, I got to appreciate this. I got to enjoy this because there's no guarantee. This season wasn't even supposed to happen. So I'm like, I can't complain. So I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is. We're supposed to be the Washington Generals to the Dodgers, Harlem Globetrotters anyway. They're supposed to curb stomp us. So if they do, they do. But at least you get 2 home games in Toronto. I get to see that in high definition, which is a big thing for me there. So I'll take it.
Yeah, and I can respect the appreciation for just the 2 games. Like even if it's a sweep, you have 2 games, there that are in the World Series and you're local, which is amazing. And then if you happen to win the damn thing and you're local, that's like insanity, And
the story would be tremendous. The story would be tremendous.
Even if you only get that one, like if it never happens again for the rest of your life, that's how I kind of felt like with the Saints in 2009. I was like, all right, I've lived to see this. And now actually for the Saints, it's just for my kids. It's like, I want them to be able to witness this, like, the same way. My youngest is huge into it. He's 10. So obviously he wasn't around in 2009. So now it's just for him, just one more shot at it,
Yeah. So I'll pose the question real quick. So this is the philosophical question I was going to ask. So for me, it was the Jays never really bottomed out. So it's one of those things for the majority of the time. So after 93, 94 was a baseball strike. So obviously nobody won the World Series that year. So that would have been their attempt to be 3-time defending. They really weren't in contention that year. They probably weren't going to get there. But after that, they don't make the playoffs for 22 years. So we go this entire time. But it's not like they lose 100 games a bunch of times. It's not like a Pittsburgh Pirates situation where you're just terrible year after year.
Right.
You're kind of okay to mediocre. They hang around in the division. They're about 3rd place. And I could almost, like clockwork, I could clock them in for 75 to 85 wins. Not terrible, but never quite good enough to get over the hump. The Yankees and the Red Sox would be ahead of them every single season, year after year. So you kind of knew where the pecking order was. You were never low enough to bottom out, but you were never good enough to crack the lineup and make the playoffs.
Yep.
So what's worse, being kind of okay-ish for a long time, for decades, or legitimately being terrible?
Yeah, and that is a tough one. And football probably a little bit different than baseball in that regard, as far as kind of like the setup, the draft, how many games they play. I feel like football allows for a little bit more of a swing, where you can go from like 0 to hero faster than maybe building a baseball team. I could be wrong though. But like for the Saints, if you go back in time, I mean, Hurricane Katrina hits, we're 3-13. We have the number 2 overall pick. We get Reggie Bush. We bring in Drew Brees, who's got a bum shoulder, and Sean Payton comes. It's kind of like the stars align, and all of a sudden we have a football team, for the next 15 years. So that's where my head is. Not that is necessarily going to happen again, but it's kind of like if we're really awful, then, and maybe it's just kind of the defense mechanism in my brain where it's like, okay, but that means top 5 draft pick, which could mean a QB bust, or like a lot of teams have.
Paul will let us know. Paul let us know.
Paul will be all over that. Or it could be like the next a great player for us, and that's the part that's fun, I think, about the NFL. But I think to answer your question though, is I would rather just be in contention. Like if we're 8-8, 9-8, 8-9 or whatever every year, but we're close though. Then I feel that then it's fun because it's like, all right, we're in it till the end of the season. Like right now we're 1-6, the season's over. Like we play the Bucs on Sunday, who are going to win the division. And then we go and play the Rams. Like we're going to win the next, or we're going to lose the next 2. I mean, the season is practically over. So now I'm looking at the draft, and that you're looking at all the the next part of the process. But yeah, I hope that we're just kind of in the doldrums for a couple of years. You regroup or you rebuild, and then we're kind of back. And if we're 8-8, whatever, then fine. But just to have like a competitive roster, I think that's always what you want. Like I want to have guys that like the other team have to actually account for. Just a couple. There's like, okay, well they got these guys. They got these few guys that we have to, that could, go off, at any particular Sunday, but we'll see.
I think that's fair. It's a reasonable answer.
All right. So based on the nostalgia, just based on what we were just talking about, actually a little side question here, because I've never been to Canada. I went to Vancouver actually about a year ago, just briefly for a day, but I've never, other than that, I've never been to Toronto, which is kind of lame because I'm in North Carolina. It's not that far. I need to get up to Toronto, but Did you ever, was there a part of like the whole Montreal Expos being so popular in the 80s? Like, and I know this wasn't your team, but just being in Canada was like, for me, I would go to like the Kmart and want like the slushy cup, like the icy cup with the Montreal Expos cup. And I just thought that their logo was so badass. And like, you see people today, like there's plenty of people in the US that wear all the Montreal Expos stuff. They're all about it, but it's because of that nostalgia of like those teams, going back in time. Did you ever have any of that with the Expos logo or any of that as a kid, or was that like, nah, that's not my team, I don't care about it?
Well, when I kind of started following sports and following baseball specifically, the Jays were my team in the local market, but because I started right at the beginning of the 90s, almost smack 91, 89, 91. So in the 80s, you had the Expos had, Gary Carter, they had some great players, and, Andre Dawson, like they had all these great players that were playing for them, but it was kind of out of the zone when I started following, when my fandom was. And again, because it's the Jays, I'm an American League guy. And then the Expos are over in the National League. So I'm going to favor the American League naturally. You respected them because you would still catch the odd game here and there. But it's and then it's also the Anglophone versus, versus English. So you'd have the Anglophone versus the Francophone. So English versus French, if you were participating. If you were closer to like Ottawa, that segment of it, close to the border with Quebec, I think you would follow them a little bit more. But where I was, it was a lot of Jays region. I just remember, so if I'm going to do nostalgia, I'm going to think back to Labatt Blue Jays baseball on TSN and those things that were on there. But I would catch the odd Expos one, and they had good players. So it's one of those things where you respected their game, but they were in the other league. You weren't paying super close attention to them necessarily.
Okay, gotcha. Now, as far as that nostalgia piece goes, there's a lot of, I'm a freak about all the 80s, 90s nostalgia stuff. Love sports, of course, from the era, but whether it's Ninja Turtles or Terminator or whatever, I can name off 50 things, Ghostbusters. Do you have that same sort of callback to that sort of stuff, when there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out? And do you, I don't know if you necessarily collect things, but do you still have the same sort of, does the nostalgia still drive some of your collecting habits today, whether that's sports stuff or even outside of that?
Yeah, so nostalgia definitely plays into it. Like for the sports, it definitely plays nostalgia. That's what that video was about. It was kind of just trying to capture that specific thing. I definitely, so I'll touch on the pop culture thing since I know that's a big thing with you. I saw a lot of the Saturday morning cartoons. I followed them. I had some of the action figures and stuff like that. Later on, it didn't interest me as much to have the action figures. My younger brother very definitely latched onto those a lot more. So I kind of gave some of mine over, left them so he inherited those. But as far as professional wrestling was the one that kind of stuck with me. I would still enjoy that stuff because I had some of those figures and that kind of thing. So I would keep some of those. Wrestling video games and things like that, and then video games in general. So if I'm doing nostalgia, the video game thing really was one that I latched on to because I like playing it. I like technology, so the video game thing made a lot more sense for me. But the action figures were fun. You could have a lot of fun with those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I had Jeremy Padawer on the show going back, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and he's one of those early 2000s. He had those, there's a clip of him fighting like a younger version of him with like the Ultimate Warrior figure and how they became more, I remember specific to action figures when Todd McFarlane came out with his version of like the Spawn figures, and then he kind of branched off from there. And then, of course, he bought the expensive baseball or the McGuire baseball or whatever, and that got him into doing all the his version of starting lineups, basically going back in time. That makes me think of that. No, that's cool. So so do you play any sort of do you play the retro video games and stuff? Do you have any of those like systems or anything like that?
Oh, I still have a bunch of them. It's kind of become an unfortunate thing as time has gone on, and we'll discuss that when we talk about the content YouTube thing. I basically watch YouTube for entertainment now. So when I'm not making content, I'm watching the content. So I've literally run out of time because earlier in my YouTube channel's life, I used to kind of do a little movie reviews and stuff like that. So I was watching more movies. So I realized at some point it's like, all right, I don't have time to sit there and watch a movie. I don't necessarily have time to sit there and play a lot of games. So it's like, I only have 24 hours in the day, and heaven forbid I work. Allegedly my employer would like me to actually do some work. So I guess I have to do that sometimes at least. So between YouTube as entertainment and making YouTube videos and content and live streams that may never end, I might still be in a live stream right now, even as I'm recording this with you. I'm not completely convinced I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely. You're
all my time.
King. Yeah, you're the king of marathon live streams for sure, no doubt.
So I just ran out of hours in the day. I would love to. There's certain games that I would definitely like. I would love to sit down and just play Streets of Rage. That was a really fun game to play. Double Dragon. That's a really fun game to play. And
Yeah.
I don't need to spend hours on it, but it's one of those things where I would play some rounds. But again, I just run out of hours in the day. If I'm going to make something, then I can't be sitting in front of a. I have some of the retro video game consoles. I do have some of them still with me, and I've got a couple of the games sitting on a shelf and everything, so I could play them if I wanted to. I've still got an Xbox that I use for Blu-rays, but I can also grab the controller and start playing some games. And now they've got the compilations, so you can actually play the games, on the new system with the new controller, which is very handy just to save you some time. You can flip between them, but I just run out of hours in the day. That's really the issue.
Yeah, same. I've got that. I've got the same sort of stuff, and I'll jump onto it for a few minutes, and it's like there's always something else that pops up. So it is what it is. My second channel I turned into the back to the 80s, 90s nostalgia channel, and trying to do kind of like history of and those sorts of things. It's really fun to make that content. It is a broader audience, which is cool because then it's like it's not so limited. But man, the competition in that space, of course, is tough. You have, I mean, there's so many guys, gals that make just over the last 20 years of YouTube make some really, really good stuff. The angry, I'm sure you've seen this guy, the angry video game guy or whatever.
The angry video game nerd. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He's kind of an OG in that. Like he built an empire off of that.
Yeah, he's I think a movie producer or something. So director. He knows what the guy's been doing it for a long time, but he's just one example of so many people that are really good at it. And I'm not trying to necessarily be them, but it's also just really fun content to make, and you can kind of make unique stuff. And then it's like I'm going to put out one that's about the Welcome to Derry show that's coming out, the prequel to It. I'm a big scary movie guy, so I like and then of course that ties back into the 90s and all that with the with the USA series with Tim Curry. So I'm going to wrap a video in around all that. So I mean, like, there's a lot of fun things to do there. That's what I was going to ask is like, how much of your YouTube is sports card content, and then how much is just watching like other sorts of things on YouTube, because there's so many great options. It feels like.
So I think the other thing now is probably about 35%. I'll mix some stuff in there because I do, like I said, the professional wrestling thing, I do still keep tabs on. I've got my second YouTube channel, and that's what it's actually talking about the wrestling cards. So I'm still sticking in the card niche, but it actually lets me, and the irony kind of playing into what you're saying, even though it's still cards and it's niche specifically, I do a couple of box breaks on there, and some of them do all right. They do pretty well. It's a lot easier though for me to get 500, 1,000 views on a video relating to that than it is oftentimes to do a sports card one, unless you happen to hit on one of the magical terms and items that everybody wants to talk about. If you touch on one of those, then it's not a problem. I'm just saying the last video that I did that got 1,000 views was PSA. No shock of shocks. I know.
You really just have to have PSA or Jeff Wilson in the title or thumbnail, and it could be about frogs. It could be about literally anything, but just throw them in the in there, and it works like a charm. It's incredible, actually. It's like its own phenomenon. So let's go to YouTube, sports card YouTube content there.
Sure.
What is your since there's so much talk about what's good content and what's bad content? I think it's so funny because everybody's obviously doing their thing, so, and I think there's always, we've talked about it, and you've talked about it too, but you're always running the balance of what do people want to watch versus what do you want to make? And, if you're always doing what you feel like everybody else wants to watch, but you don't like making it, then eventually there's burnout there. You just can't, it's a job then you're like, God, I know this is going to get clicks, but it's like another one of these same type of videos. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it does get repetitive if you go that route, for sure. It's one of those things that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. People will tell you they don't want to hear more about this, but then if you try to go off of that, then the views drop. And you can say that you don't want to hear about it, and you say, oh, you hate this content, you don't want to hear about it, but then I'm seeing in the comment section constantly. So it's like automatic. It's like a cheat code. You basically go in there and do that. My answer to that has always been the live stream is my anecdote to that. It's what's prevented like kind of the burnout thing, because even though, as long as they are, and obviously you've had your fun kind of talking about how long, the only reason they're that long though, is because it's basically us just hanging out on a Friday. So right. we do talk about sports cards. So it's like, there'll be segments. So like, we'll talk about this thing. Maybe there will be a story or something worthwhile talking about, and we'll talk about it for 25 minutes. And then suddenly we'll start talking about food. or
Yeah,
we'll start talking about movies, or we'll start talking about something else. Like the other day, we were literally just chatting about certain types of, somebody had, is there a song that's kind of a guilty pleasure that you'd be ashamed of? And that's with the chat. We spent probably about 20 or 25 minutes talking about that. That had
yeah,
nothing to do with sports card. So I don't pretend it's not a sports card live stream. It's just
yeah.
whatever we feel like talking about.
It's
But
like
then all of a
guys.
sudden we'll stop.
Yeah, it's like guys at the coffee shop or in the cigar room or something, just chatting. That's
Yeah.
basically what it makes me think of. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like that though, because you are able to kind of wrap in whether it's cards or card related topics, or it could be pop culture, it could be whatever. And you have between Bobby and Eric and Carl and Brandon, who's sometimes on, and then you have other guests that pop in.
Mm-hmm.
It gives a good variety. It's a good variety show in that way, I think.
Yeah. And then occasionally something will come up. Somebody will ask a legitimately interesting question. And then we'll suddenly pause, we'll pause on the comedy and kind of the side stuff. And we'll spend 30 minutes actually seriously debating a conversation. Somebody will play devil's advocate and we'll kind of go back and forth and sometimes we'll have Ham on and then he'll start talking about aliens.
Yeah. Ham is great for that. Actually,
Yeah.
on Off-Centered, he did not get enough airtime this last show. We need to make sure that Ham gets more time, more talk time, because you don't really know what's going to come out of his mouth, and that's what's perfect. That's what's great about Ham. It could be he goes ham, and then you just have to react to it.
Occasionally I'll just push that button. Occasionally I'll just be like, so you want to come on? And he goes, of course. he'll just start talking about, and I'll let him and Bobby argue. And that's the easiest day of a live stream for me, Dustin, is when I bring Ham on and I let him and Bobby argue for 25 minutes and I get to sit back and just enjoy my beer. It's fabulous.
Have a drink, go to the restroom if you need to. Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great. Is there content that if you're retired, you had more time or whatever, let's say, that you would like to make, but it's like finding time for it is just not possible?
I would love to do, I would still do the sports card thing because it is fun for me. And I have things that I can share, which is nice. It's fun. I would love to do a little bit more of the wrestling thing, but it's one of those things where that I would need the additional time. But I would probably, if I had, was retired and I actually had that rest of the time, I would probably create some kind of a third channel where then I had some podcasts on some random topics, because that's where the fun is. It's where you can go a little deep dive into some of these other things, because, a lot of us have opinions on different things. And I like to think that I spend some time being well-read in certain things. So it's like, it's just time. There's not enough hours in there. That's the reason the live stream, we can go in a bunch of different directions. It's like, I'm not interested in just talking about one thing. Can we talk about some of these other things? Because maybe something really interesting that we had never had a chance to discuss, and suddenly it comes up, and maybe we spend half an hour talking about that.
Yeah. Do you think that because there is, it's like this weird, obviously for clicks and eyeballs and that sort of thing, there's the spectacle of it and there's the drama piece. But the spectacle, I mean, would just mean like breaking channels. If you're opening packs and you're yelling about it, there's an entertainment value. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where there is kind of more focus around, the education on certain, whether it's cards or sets? Because we certainly have it in pieces. You have it, it's just kind of scattered around. There's different guys doing different things, covering different topics, but it doesn't feel like it's organized enough for people to find it and for people to know about that. I feel like you'd almost have to have like 5 channels that are like, here's the go-to. These guys are always covering just different, it's all just education. There's not enough. It feels like it's kind of like spread out.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think so I'll throw an analogy. You mentioned earlier about watching other types of videos. One that like mini genre that sometimes I like to listen to is kind of like essays, basically, on so music, for example. There's certain channels that I'll follow where they'll literally do an essay on an album. So they'll talk about the history of the album, the band, and everything that kind of led up into it, and talk. So basically what they're doing is they're creating this 35 40 minute thing where it's like a mini documentary, but basically they'll go into the background, explain this, explain that. That's going to be the key for what you're talking about. The key is, there are a lot of people that are very knowledgeable, but it's like listening to a lecture in a lecture hall. And I did that in my university life. Like, my degree was in history. I've sat in my share of lectures. The problem is lectures are tedious. So it's not the easiest thing. You can have amazing information, but you better be able to deliver it in a way that engages the person that's listening. And that doesn't mean frills. It doesn't mean throw, clips on the screen. What it actually means, though, is you have to be able to present it in a way that actually maintains the interest of the listener. Because the problem is, if you don't, what you're trying to accomplish there is undermined by the audience is sitting there going, yeah, this is interesting, but this is like going to the library to the reference section. If I
Yeah.
go to the library, if I have something I really want to know, I'll go to the library virtually, obviously, Google the library kids, to the reference section, and I'll grab the specific thing I want, look up the specific thing I want, but then there's all these other reference books that I'm going to ignore because I'm not interested in that. Well, the
Yeah.
YouTube channel that you're talking about, the struggle would be like, okay, well, how do you get enough people interested in enough different things so they're not just grabbing the one reference they want and then, all right, now I'm done with you.
Yeah, it would almost have to be. I'm just thinking as you're talking about it, I feel like you would have to do a video about Mickey Mantle, and then you would have to wrap baseball cards into that video. So maybe it's like it's more like a life story on Mickey Mantle, or kind of more of
Sure.
an overview. And you're talking about Mickey Mantle. That will get there's search results on that. Like if you're looking at Google, like who's searching for what. There's not a lot of people searching for Mickey Mantle baseball cards. I'm just using him as an example. Actually, it's probably not a great example because there actually is probably a decent amount of people that look up Mickey Mantle baseball cards, but
Yeah,
sure, whoever it is. But if you're talking about Ted Williams and he went to World War II and you have like a whole story, but then you're also wrapping in the card angle to it. That's probably like a backdoor way into kind of sharing card knowledge, but you're tackling it in a different. You're kind of tackling it from a larger, audience scope.
Yeah, there are a few I can, after we're done talking, I'll share with you. I don't know if you've seen it before. I'll share with you a channel that I think does a good job with weaving a narrative, because what you basically just said is whoever's doing it has to be able to give a story. If you're a good storyteller, you can incorporate that knowledge piece into it and it will go over better. It'll, the people will be able to absorb it better, and they may be interested then in coming back and hearing your next story.
Yeah. But then the other part of that is you also have to edit it well, and it's got to be kind of YouTube ready, to where it's kind of like what you said. If it's, a monologue, if it's a 40-minute monologue, and maybe even if you're throwing pictures up on the screen, that's still a long time, unless somebody's listening to it like a podcast, which you could draw people like that. But ideally you're wrapping in kind of video clips and different things and just adding a little bit more to it. It would be challenging, but I think that it could be doable for sure. For the vintage baseball, especially if you're just kind of focused on vintage baseball folks, for example.
Yeah, well, they rely on a lot on the story. The story for them is going to be really critical, because if you can do that, then you can take a relatively mundane you can take a 53 Bowman color card of a guy you maybe never heard of, but give him a story, and that might make it a little more interesting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So how much are you enjoying all the drama channels on YouTube? And, when are we going to get the No Holds Barred Carlos channel? I'm just waiting. One day it's going to hit my feed, this Carlos wearing a mask or something, talking in like a different, like talking with an accent, like, whoa, man, like something like just, I don't know, something snaps, just something snaps upstairs and you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going all in. Is that coming?
Some people would argue I borderline do that sometimes anyway, as it is. Dustin, I'm a man of peace. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I could do it. It would be fun. Like in a certain way, going back to the professional wrestling thing, it would be fun to go heel. And I joke on the live that it's like, well, it's debatable that I kind of already do sometimes. Like I'm already right against that edge sometimes, but it's one of those things where, I think maybe this would be the way I would present that, and kind of I can throw it back to you as well. I like the idea of building the channel. I like the idea of people listening. And that's part of what makes the live fun, is that there is a chat. We're engaging. We're going back and forth. I read their comments the same day they write them. That's something that I heard is a challenge for some. But
I don't know what you mean, but yeah, go ahead.
I just thought I would throw that out there, just as a random thought in the world. But the engagement is the fun part. It's the back and forth between and sometimes they'll throw in some really good ideas and, okay, actually this is a path we can go down. So if there is an entertainment element, I think some people in YouTube forget it is entertainment. The drama channels do a good job getting that kind of engagement, but it's one of those things where, like, can you keep people out? How long can you keep people outraged before you burn them out? The same vein, though, kind of playing into what I was talking about when I was saying with you, is I like the idea of building the audience, but there is a certain point where it's no longer manageable. Right now, my chat is manageable because there is people in there, but some of them are regulars. They know the jokes. So when we go in certain directions, they have fun with it as much as anybody else. So if I'm making fun of Eric, they're making fun of Eric too. So they're kind of all playing into it as well. But once it gets to a certain point, like on Off Center, you guys have reached about the saturation point where now it's like they're going to have their own conversation separate from what you're doing. So they're not really engaging with you. They sort of are, But then Steve will have a tangent, then Ham will have a tangent. Neo is staring into the abyss. So like it's not always the cohesive thing. It
Yeah,
works
we
for
don't
what
know.
it is, but it's not
Yeah,
always there.
Neo, we don't know if he slipped into a coma half the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
did his screen freeze? Nope. He's just staring off at the TV across the way.
Yeah.
Uh,
But you've kind of see it though. Like, so
yeah.
jokes aside though, when you're seeing it, so when you make a video, if for whatever reason it strikes a nerve, all you have to do, and we've had fun with it on the Discord, go to your comment section. You'll see a bunch of comments of varying types and degrees. But at a certain point though, don't you think, and this is a question for you, don't you think though at a certain point you almost like, it's good that the platform is built to a certain point, but it's like so many of you are kind of missing the point that I'm trying to make. Like, I'm not interested in arguing with you. It is simply not worth my time. So at the same time, it's like, I'm happy you're engaging in a way that's good. You know, you've got the sponsors and everything, which is nice, you know, throw in the code. But at the same time, it's like, it's also kind of annoying. And I'm just not interested in dealing with it. So at a certain stage, it's like, no, I'm good. I'm kind of happy at the level that I'm kind of at where I still get to engage. I can still engage with each individual if I want to. I'm at a level where I can still do that. If you make it big enough, though, I simply can't.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like it's changed over time too. When I first started the channel, and I don't know if it was kind of like, maybe it was like 2020 exuberance or people. Exuberance is a weird word because it was the pandemic. So it's not like, people were extremely happy, but, and I'm not even talking about like prices going crazy and all of that. I know that was probably part of it, but it just felt like maybe people were just like appreciative to watch something on YouTube that they found around cards, because I just remember a lot more comments that were like, hey, thanks for the video. And look, I don't need that to thrive, but it's like, anybody that makes content knows it feels good when somebody's like, hey, really enjoyed this, because you put time and effort into it, even if it's, it might have been an hour of your day, it might have been 4 hours of your day, whatever it was. Everyone that makes a piece of content, they put some sort of effort and thought into doing it. And so the idea that you dive in just to like throw a sucker punch or to just say, it's like, I know that's part of the game. And as you mentioned, like as you grow, you get more and more of that. And some weird stuff for sure. God, like that's one thing that just being on the internet, taught me, was just how strange it can be out there. Yeah. Like some of the reaction videos that I get, I've been called like all sorts of crazy stuff. Shout out to John Reckoning out there. If you do watch this, we're on we're certainly on better terms now, but man, there's been some, he said that just going back in time, that I basically said I got the jab or I got the shot or whatever, and I'm going to turn into a zombie in the next few months, and that's just, my buddy sent me a picture and he's like, this says the sports card dad is a Satanist. Like that was the title of the video. So yeah, when you start your channel, guys, if you're new to the content or you're wondering about it, like that's not necessarily stuff that you think you're going to get when you start a sports card channel. This is not like, we're not talking politics on here. We're not talking about religion. We're talking about sports cards, which I guess maybe for some it is kind of like a religion. But
imagine if we did though. Like you're getting this kind of reaction before you even get. Imagine if you took that. It's like sports card is like sports card dad / Pope.
Yeah, I mean, where there's some sort of sermon at the end of it. Hey, maybe that's a zag at some point. Maybe that's some sort of content zag. Stay tuned, everybody. You never know.
But I will say one quick thing, just to throw in there, is with all that said, though, it is refreshing when once in a blue moon you'll get the comment where somebody's disagreeing, but then they'll actually say, I disagree, but this is why. And then it's actually a dialogue. And I'm like, how quaint. It's like you disagree, but at the same time, you're throwing another idea back at me. And then I could throw an idea back at you. And maybe we still disagree, but at least that was an engagement. That was actually like, okay, no, that's perfectly fine. You disagree, but you threw something back at me that maybe I hadn't considered. That's good to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, and I don't know if this has just gotten worse over time, but I feel like they're just highly polarized comments a lot of the times where it's like, I can't really build off of it. It's like scam, fraud, like everything is, basically like taking it to the nth degree without listening to, and look, my takes, if you're getting worked up about my takes are pretty, I mean, look, I try to kind of look at it from a couple angles. It's not anything that's mega controversial. I just look at it as just kind of like, hey, let's look at this from both sides. Maybe it's the company side, and maybe it's the collector side. Maybe it's the speculator side. These are not like wildly crazy takes, I mean, and still people just really get worked up. And I appreciate the passion for sure. But as you mentioned, it's just, I can't really, if it's just like XYZ company is a scam, or I hate them, or I hope they go out of business. It's like, I don't know how to really, I don't know how to respond to that. So over time, what happens is I end up responding to like 10% of the comments, because there's not anything I can really build off of, and that's okay. As you said, like, yeah, you want the engagement, but it would be cool if it was just a little bit more balanced. I think with all that, like, it just feels like I go into my comments or other people's comment section. It's like, are you guys having fun? Like, do you guys enjoy any of this? Or are you like, it just feels like there's a lot of misery in the comment sections.
We have to assume on some level there has to be some enjoyment, because so even for all the YouTube I watch, I'm not a great commenter at this stage in the game. Generally speaking, if I like something,
Yeah, me
I
too.
may take a second. I may take a second to put something in it, because I do want to at least acknowledge if somebody came. Maybe they said something that I hadn't considered. So, hey, I should at least acknowledge. I feel like the respectful thing to do is to throw in, hey, you know what? This is an interesting idea, or like, I hadn't thought of that, or that, hey, thanks for sharing it, or whatever. But it's once in a blue moon, though. Most of the time, if I listen to a lot of stuff just to kind of hear what they say, but a lot of times it's like, maybe I'll hit the thumbs up if I really like it. But otherwise, if I don't, for whatever reason, then I just click off and go to the next thing. Like,
I do the same thing, but it's like, I would rather, like, it's like I don't comment, but I'm not going to go out of my way to say like this video sucked, or like you're stupid or whatever. Like, I'm not going to do that. If anything, if I ever comment, it's going to be like, hey, great points or whatever. I mean, but maybe that's just my style. I don't know. But yeah, the content game is an interesting one. It's fun though. I mean, I really enjoy it. I know that you do too, with the consistency. You guys have been doing the live stream for a long time, and you've just been doing YouTube in general for a long time. So I'm actually kind of moving more into your, like, the old world. Was it Universal Soldier movie review that you did going back in time?
That was that was one of the, so there were two that really took off. Universal Soldier was one, and the other one was the Marine. I don't know
the
why.
Marine, yes. But what's sad though is now if you do it, so like now there's so much content out there, it's like it's saturated now. Like it won't work the same way, and it's like with a lot of the stuff, it just, as it ages, it picks up views and stuff. Like you said, I think you still get a bunch of views on those, here and there. But it's like the age like fine wine, but the new stuff, it just doesn't hit the same. It's kind of like if you were in that moment in time, if only we knew to just kind of start early and stay with it. I didn't even know YouTube was a thing until 2018, 19, where people are actually doing commentary and stuff like that. I decided it was like how to fix your toilet, type thing. But
fair enough.
Well, Carlos, it's 20 minutes with. This is like a Chris Hoge episode where we're at 37 minutes, but I feel like we covered some good ground here. Hopefully we can do it again soon. Is there anything that you wanted to throw out there? You are at for people to find you, Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel. Any final words as we root for the Blue Jays to sweep the Dodgers in the World Series?
Oh, definitely go Jays go. But in addition to that, I also say, and Neo will appreciate this wherever he is, praise the content gods. And you understand that as well as anybody else.
We expect 22 reaction videos within the next 24 hours. Signing off. Thanks, man.